Tammy's here because I saw her sign in. So the library budget is first.
Wait, Mike, is that the cue? Just so Chad knows.
Yeah, that's the cue. So,
very soft open. It's like Saturday Night Live, it's just very soft open.
would you all please take your books and open to the library page? Hey, Tammy, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
All right. Yep.
Great.
Yep. So the library budget has 3 pages in our budget books. And the last page is where it shows the municipal request. Because this budget, unlike our other departments, has the expenses and the revenues shown on the same pages. So the third page is the revenues minus the expenses. You see there on the bottom line, the municipal request is $725,565, which would be an increase of $37,000 over our current year budget. So I'm going to let Tammy pretty much take it from here, going back to the first page with the salaries and benefits. Tammy, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. I wasn't sure what to expect with this format, so I know we're all bearing with the circumstances of one another. The budget as presented comes with guidance from the Board of Trustees and my recommendations. It is a 5% increase in ask from the city of Waterville. There are just a couple of things that I wanted to point out and then open up for questions. In the salary section, you may notice that there's a switch from full-time and part-time. We have, in the last year, chosen to invest in 3 of our existing staff members in lieu of hiring a professional librarian. And that change there that's what that reflects. And
that's why we see a huge reduction in the part-time.
Correct.
And then it kind of flips into the full-time.
Correct. We were able to get more for our money, to be honest with you.
Great.
And great people who've been providing great service for some years, already well vetted. And I was very, very proud of them. I am very proud of them. The other line that I wanted to point out in the expenses is the facility line, which is on your second page. In the top third of the listed items. It reflects an increase to $57,000. That's coming from direct guidance from my board. Industry best practices recommend a 1 to 2% allocation for maintenance for a facility and for the library. The minimum for that is about $60,000. So at the $57,000, we're still under that best practice recommendation, but doing a lot better than we have in many years. This past fiscal year, we've been able to solve some long-standing issues and problems at the library, including a drainage problem on the front patio that's improved the integrity of the foundation of the library, and it's also aesthetically more pleasing. So that just to give you one specific example of how properly funding the maintenance line of the facility helps us take care of the asset.
Can I just jump in here on that? Because Tammy, I've spent basically all 5 years as mayor working with the library, trying to figure out how to get things more streamlined. Cindy Jacobs has met with Pete folks over the years, and this is something that I know we've been gradually working towards every year, because some of you will remember a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, we bonded quite a bit of money to fix a lot of stuff at the library that wouldn't have had to have gone into a bond had we just done proper routine maintenance. So big picture, this is something I think absolutely makes sense, because in the long run, the 10, 20-year long run, increasing this line, I think saves us money and makes sure that we're preserving, the historic building that we have, and not having Tammy come to us. Not that we're not going to have to bond for stuff. I don't want to put you in a spot. So if you have to bond for something, Nick said we never had to bond, but very different when we're when we're actively taking care of the building. And I know they've done quite a bit of stuff over the years on a shoestring budget to do half fixes and partial fixes, and this gets us going in the right direction, I think.
And that is, thank you. That is our hope. We really want the building to be on a pathway of sustained, healthy, proactive maintenance, so that hopefully the problems are less expensive in the long run.
Right.
We currently, last time I saw you all, you approved our recommendation for a contractor. That work is actively underway, and we couldn't be more grateful because we have gotten a lot of rain and there are 2 active sites for leaking. So, whatever we can do to stay on top of keeping that building, beautiful building, maintained is greatly appreciated. Those are the 2 primary elements that I wanted to point out about the budget. Are there questions that I can answer? Yes, Eric.
Tammy, what effect has all of this had on your budget for this year?
I had actually prepared more remarks about that, and I haven't shared them yet, but so let me try to draw on some of those. We did have to lay off 5 of our part-time employees, super part-time employees, to help mitigate against the loss of revenues that we make. It's not a lot of our budget, but so we're not collecting fines right now. We're not collecting copy, payments for copies and things of that nature. We are hoping that with the management strategies we are employing, that we will be looking at a wash situation with some decisions to reduce spending to pair with the loss of revenues that we've had. Another significant piece of revenue loss is we normally run a children's campaign right about now, and that's obviously just not appropriate to do. So, yeah.
What kind of hours are you guys just closed? What exactly is going on over there?
We are closed, but we are busy as heck. We are promoting awareness of a lot of vetted, trusted resources in the community. We are facilitating access to electronic resources. We are doing online programs, and we're doing a lot of collection and database maintenance projects that are actually well served by being closed. This is kind of stuff that you can't get to usually ever. And then a significant initiative that's underway. I have staff aggressively pursuing public library certifications, and I have several who have completed several different levels, are working towards different levels of certifications, and this is a program vetted by the Maine State Library. So I have 12 staff working intensively. I have a couple of staff who are at the facility almost every day, taking care of monitoring leaks, payroll, paying bills, things of that nature, dealing with the mail, we still have items being returned to the library. I'm gonna get off this and staff are gonna be like, I can't believe you didn't mention such and such. We've had over 25 online programs done by our children's librarian, and we've seen over 3,000 viewers on those online programs.
I passed by one of those today and I stopped for a sec. That was great.
Cool. Does that help? Did I answer your question, Eric? Did he leave? He did. Oh,
Yeah, well, and what do you anticipate? I mean, obviously the governor just came out with guidelines today, but I mean, have you had any discussions about when you think you're going to get back to any sort of normal operations?
I was in another board meeting when that and those announcements were made, so I haven't even had a chance to read and try to process. We are actively pursuing trying to figure that out. People miss their library. We get voicemails. We get people shouting at us across the street or at the grocery store. What date? I don't know. We had a lot to figure out. We have been in a weekly meeting with Maine State Library leadership and about 200 library workers from around the state right from beginning of March, constantly retooling how we're serving our communities and figuring out how we can as quickly and safely as possible reopen. A lot to figure out.
Well, and so to, a cold dose of reality, I don't think things are going to look good when we actually start getting numbers from the state.
Understood.
If we come back to everybody and look for savings, what exactly could you do? What's possible in order to try to save money in your budget?
I think we certainly there's not a lot of extra in our budget ever. We're very lean.
Tammy, is there a chance under the facility
Yeah,
maintenance?
that's where I was headed. I'm
Okay.
reluctant to do it, but that's where I'm headed because that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, with the bond money that you
Correct.
have on so many different things,
That's right.
I'm wondering if there might be money left over to handle some of those items. There's no question a lot of the stuff has been, I won't say ignored, but passed over for a long time. So a lot of that's needed, but maybe there'll be money left.
Well, and has the work gotten more efficient since you don't have patrons at the library? Has that had any effect on their ability to do the work in a timely manner?
Some things, other things, honestly, we're constantly evaluating, reassessing, retooling, trying to figure out what Liz, our children's librarian, is trying to figure out what does summer programming look like. We're really committed to serving our community. We feel that mental wellness is the significant part of what we're contributing to. Yes, in some ways. Other things we're trial and error. You're trying to figure out new things. As the COVID situation was coming to the forefront while we were still open, we were spending an extraordinary amount of time amping up our cleaning routines and sanitizing routines. So I imagine, that will be a part of our picture as we move back into reopening as well. Yeah.
Questions? Anyone else? Sid?
Yeah, Tammy, I
then-
just want to obviously commend you. And everybody doesn't know, but Cindy Jacobs is my next door neighbor.
Oh,
So we certainly connect all the time. Never seen anybody that's a facilitator and initiator like she is. She's off the charts. But we connect all the time, and I do agree with the mayor about the maintenance line. I think it's justified in trying to invest in that line. I think the library has a long-standing history of needed repairs and maintenance for a very long time that they have grappled with and gone, and most of the time it's been shortcomings. I do agree with Eric on the budget realities with revenue sharing. It's going to be a testy subject as we proceed forward, but obviously with where the state is, where the pandemic is. But I certainly commend the library. The library, I can tell you, has been always consistently in all the years I've been on the city council with a very lean budget. I can't commend them enough. They really do a lot with nothing. And I will shout that out because they have a very consistent history of doing that. They've even taken cuts above and beyond and been very forthcoming with that on several municipal budgets that I can remember. So I just want to commend you for your work. The Waterville Public Library is a definite asset to this city, not only the city, but the whole region. And I hear the calls from many, many citizens, especially the senior citizen community that wants that library open. Cindy Jacobs was telling me that she has people calling her all the time, especially the senior citizen committee that, they have, they read up to 5-6 books. Sometimes they could read that in a day. So they're definitely waiting for you guys to open and all the other wonderful activities that you guys provide. It's just a valuable asset. And I just wanted to say that.
thank you.
Claude,
So
did you have a question, Claude?
Yes, I was just wondering, Cindy, if you are actively making plans for remote access to the library and ways that people can use electronic books and the like.
Yes, we have been aggressively promoting awareness about our electronic and audiobooks through a service called Cloud Library. And the Maine State Library has solicited donations over the last weeks from and been able to amplify the collections in those offerings. So that is definitely a way that we are providing service to the community. And going to a point that Sid just made, we did have an elderly couple in their 80s call and leave a heartbreaking message about, all they have is TV and books, and they've long since read their books, and they read 10 to 15 books a week, and can we please get open? And we were not optimistic that they could handle the cloud library, but we gave it a great try. And let me tell you what, they're into the cloud library. They're so happy. So that experience, coupled with a hospice patient whose end of life is being enhanced by being able to read material out of the cloud library. We are in the process, going to a question you asked, Eric, working on some marketing communications to help figure out ways for some folks who may not be on Facebook to become more aware of some of these resources. Probably we'll send a letter to people's homes to try to make sure that they're aware of these resources. It's a tough time. My heart really goes out to everyone who's affected by this pandemic. People have lost their jobs. People are losing their businesses. It's heartbreaking and difficult. And we're determined to do whatever we can to be a positive asset of sharing resources and information, and frankly, distraction with some of the resources that we're able to provide. Thank you. I know you're all in a tough spot.
Thank you, Tammy. I think we're going to move to the airport next, unless anyone else has questions for Tammy. If not,
Tammy.
thank you again.
Thank you.
Tammy?
Is it okay if I leave this meeting?
It is.
You may.
Hi. Thank you so much.
So at the front of your book is Randy's budget. As you look at that front page, first page, you'll see really there's not a lot of big changes. The bottom line increase is a 3.3% increase. Randy is here and can touch on that. The salaries, Randy, is no change in personnel in terms of the number of personnel that you have, right? Yep. And on the operations side, why don't you just take us through any other changes on the operations side?
Sure. So the largest change that we're looking at or request that we're looking for is on our, much kind of like what Tammy had, is our maintenance items. We've had some expenses this year related to fuel farm maintenance, as well as our taxiwheel lights. Those continue to plague us. We have another fuel farm that we need to look at doing some maintenance on. So I've put that in this year's budget as items that we should address this year. So that become larger problems that hinder our operation when we have a failure. That's more or less the largest part of it, really. Everything else is pretty minuscule.
Questions? Sid?
Randy, what is minus 650 on the telephone internet?
So last year we had presented a budget of 4,000, and I was able to negotiate with Spectrum to some reduced rates, and we also removed the wireless internet from the vehicle that we were using. It just didn't, the application in which we were trying to use it didn't work very well, so it really wasn't worth the cost, so we eliminated it.
The other question I have, Randy, is being a part of the Airport Advisory Committee, are we losing any revenue as far as communication coming into the airport with not always having somebody physically there to answer the phones?
Well, actually, in fact, the phones are forwarded. So if you call the airport right now, it's going to ring on my cell phone. So everything's been forwarded right from the beginning of the month. So right now I answer the phone for them.
Okay, that's wonderful.
He puts in his 40 hours and then some. Claude,
Is there any change in the aviation fuel?
In what reference?
Well, they're giving away oil right now. Is that having an effect on the aviation fuel?
It has. We have not purchased any fuel since November because we have the large tanks. So we're actually getting down to the lower end of that. So when we go to purchase fuel, we'll be able to get it at rock bottom prices. And depending on what the market continues to do, we'll dictate how we do our pricing. But we always try to maintain a consistent gap in our revenue versus our expense over the fuel cost. So
yeah, why don't you tell us on the jet fuel what our quote unquote profit is, and then on the 100 low lead, how much per gallon do we earn?
So on the jet fuel, the margin is a minimum of $2, and then we add in a transactional fee per gallon as well, which averages about 16 cents. So $2.16 is what we'll put in over our cost on fuel for 100 or for the jet fuel. The 100 octane, historically, we've done 65 cents plus the 16 cents. We've added another 20 cents to that right now, simply because we had some extreme cost. We spent almost $5,000 in repairing the 100 octane farm this year, and helped try to recover some of that. We increased our price on the fuel while still remaining competitive.
Because you check with area airports all the time about what they're selling for, so you make sure that our pricing is in line or maybe even a little bit better than what others are offering.
Yes.
Which leads us into the air revenue side of things. So if you want to go to page 5.
Well, Eric, do you have a question?
Well, that was going to be my question. I mean, I guess I'm asking you to read the tea leaves a little bit, but do you think our revenues are going to be down because of this? Or do you think maybe people will be more inclined to fly in their private jet because they don't want to get on a commercial plane? What have we seen so far?
That is the $1 million question, or at least in our case, at least a couple $100,000 question. We've seen a dramatic decrease, and so has everyone in the nation. The last phone call I was on with the FAA noted about a 90% decline in general aviation traffic. So we're definitely going to see a drop in our fuel sales. But when we're not selling fuel, we're not purchasing fuel to replace that. So we're losing the profit, but we're also losing some of the expense. Now, one thing that the FAA has done is through the CARES Act, and this was something that Eric, you sent out in an email just a little while ago, and I sent you guys all back a link. So something we have coming to Waterville is a $30,000 grant from the FAA, which is 100%. We have no local share. It's Mike's got it in his hands to go back to the FAA. So that's $30,000 as part of the CARES Act grant that will help cover our gap.
Is that all we're eligible for? I mean, I sent you that because I just saw this on the news, and somebody else at another small airport said, I think they got enough money to basically fund the airport for the next 20 years, he said.
I think there are some errors in the list. So on that link, there's actually, you can see every single airport in the United States that's going to be receiving funding, and it breaks it down into categories as to whether or not you're like a regional airport, a national airport. It breaks it down if you're a regional and national in terms of debt service, in terms of enplanements, which is how many passengers you have. There's a number of variables, and I will say that the program wasn't foolproof. It wasn't perfect. They rolled it out very quickly. There are some errors in there. For example, one of the things that's published is that Rockland, Knox County is getting like $17 million.
I
While
don't think so.
I don't think so. And I kind of I chuckled when I saw it. I said, that's definitely wrong. They put the decimal in the wrong place. While Portland was getting $12 million. So, of course, they fall in, Portland and Bangor fall into much larger airports. There's a lot of factors. It's a very in-depth, kind of complicated process in which they calculated this. But typically, for a general aviation airport our size, you look at
And Eric,
Northwalk, Millinocket, Lincoln, Pittsfield, they all got 30,000.
yeah, this form that came in from the FAA already had our amount already printed in.
Yeah, they determined it through an algorithm that they came up with, and that's not to say that there won't be some changes coming down the road. One of the other things that they're doing is they're taking all FAA projects that were already scheduled, and they're funding them at 100%. So you may recall the last council meeting that I came to. We were discussing applying for a grant from the FAA for a pavement preservation project and hiring Stantec Consulting to do that. And that was going to be about a $500,000 project with a price tag on our end of about $20,000. We don't have to worry about that now. They're going to take care of that. So,
Well, I mean, the revenue side really worries me. I mean, it seems like a place where we could end up with a big hole in our budget that we're not planning on.
right.
I mean, what would it mean if, for example, our fuel sales were down 50%? What's the net?
Well, you take our credit card sales basically and cut that in half, more or less.
Right, but we'd also cut the expense of the fuel in half. So what would be the net effect on the budget?
Well, if we were to not sell any fuel at all, the absolute worst we could do is about a $300,000 expense to the city to run the airport. Absolute worst case scenario. That's not going to be the case. I mean, that would be zero fuel sold, no revenue whatsoever.
Oh, Randy, you know the number of gallons that we sell every year for for jet fuel, you know the gallons for 100 low lead.
Yeah.
So those gallons, a discounted number of those gallons times $2 a gallon would give us the shortfall.
Yeah. So I don't have that number right in front of me, but I want to say.
No, but why don't you do that? Because I mean, all of our departments are getting ready to report back on what they think their June 30 end of budget spendings are going to be.
Yeah.
So that's part of that, Randy. That's probably a good thing to do.
Yeah, I can to finish out this year, because we should see that $30,000 coming in from the FAA. Right now, the last budget to actual that I have shows us about $32,000 over budget. This will put us back onto budget as of March, and we'll see where April, May, and June go.
So do you think we should be cautious about buying fuel? I mean, I know we can get a hell of a price right now, but I don't want to incur a big expense.
Right. I'm of the same thought. I'm watching the market, and it's continuing to drop. We have a full truck right now, but we're not servicing a lot of planes. We've had 3 medical flights in the last 3 weeks, and that's been basically it. It's really, I don't see us having to purchase fuel unless we see some sort of dramatic change in what's going on.
How would that compare with a normal April? Would you be starting to see flights coming in?
April tends to be the month where some of the smaller stuff starts to trickle in. It's really going to impact our June, maybe a little bit of May, but June tends to be one of our busier months, and then July, August, September are very busy with summer camps. Of course, we're also not going to see Colby commencement, which is another one of the days that we tend to be very busy.
Of course, there's a question about the summer camps too.
Yeah, a lot rides on what happens.
And I guarantee those aren't opening.
No, I don't foresee that either. So I'm definitely doing everything I can to minimize any outgoing expenses that are absolutely unnecessary. I mean, we've shut the heat off in the building, the lights off in the building. We've not been spending any money. We're not doing any projects whatsoever.
I mean, what other avenues do we really have to save money besides not buying fuel?
Not doing projects, which is what we're doing. I mean, there are minimum things we have to do. We have to keep the lawns mowed. We have to keep the lights on the airfield on, and that's all we're going to focus on. And we're gonna scale back and run a minimal operation for as long as we have to.
You could use one of your part-time people instead of two at the same time, probably.
The one hard part with that is that with that CARES Act grant, we do have to keep a 90% on our payroll. So we do have to keep our people employed. Because where we only have 5 of us, you lose one person.
What's the name of that grant? I'm sorry?
It's the CARES Act.
Oh, the one we just are going to get,
Yes,
because that's support operations
yes,
and
Well,
presumably job protection or, okay,
yes.
I get it. Other questions for Randy? Rick?
You're muted, Rick.
Rick. You're muted.
Sorry, I pulled a mic there.
Yeah, I read your lips.
So I don't know which one this is for. When does the CARES Act grant money come inbound? Other words,
They're
are we
rolling
gonna-
things out almost immediately.
Yeah, I think pretty soon. Yes. They didn't give me a date with the email they sent, but I think it's meant to get out very, very quickly to support the kind of things we're talking about, keeping the budget viable and people employed.
Go ahead.
Anybody? Anybody? We're good? Randy, thank you very much.
All right.
All right. Hey, get me the ID number for this thing so I can send it in tomorrow, right?
You
I
got
sent
it.
you an email.
Yes. Okay. You got it.
Thank you.
That's you.
All right.
Thank you.
Parks and Recreation. Parks and Rec budget has 5 different pieces, 5 pages within it. And the very first page is the admin, Matt, and then the costs associated with the office. There aren't any big changes in that first page on admin. The bottom line increase is $3,448. Unless people have questions, we'll go to the next page on Parks and Rec. That's all right. That's the maintenance, a much bigger budget because this is where Matt's full-time and part-time people are. So Matt, I'm going to let you take it from there.
Right. Hello, everyone. So we have 2 full-time employees, and which is in that first line, full-time salaries and wages. And we are, I think you've probably heard, proposing to hire a third person and split that labor position with the Public Works Department. So that's a big reason for the increase down at the bottom line. But getting a little more into the detail, the part-time and temporary wages is for between 10 and 12 seasonals that we hire each year between, say, about now until November or December.
So the guys I saw working out in the park today, those are your seasonal.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So, and then, of course, I'm happy to answer any questions, but then when we go down into the meat of my budget, beginning with sewer and water, you'll see a few modest increases in equipment rental, for example, field and tree maintenance, facility maintenance, and riverwalk maintenance. Like I said, I think these are modest increases. Our facilities are aging. You know, our fence lines, our trail bridges, our trails in general they're beginning to break down. They're rotting away to some extent. We also have an aging tree inventory in the city. Trees aren't getting any younger, so the field and tree maintenance line I really think is worthy to be increased. And when we built the Riverwalk, we didn't put together a budget. Well, we proposed a budget, but it wasn't accepted last year. So I'm hoping that we can start some seed money with $5,000 toward things like mulch, repairs, fertilization, weed control. I was just down there today, and I think Sydney, you've remarked before that the area looks like it could be maintained better, and I agree. It's just hard with the personnel and the budget that we have. So I'm hoping that some seed money, like I said, the $5,000 can go toward being dedicated strictly for maintenance at the Riverwalk, so we can maintain it the way that it should be maintained. It's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, even now. So yeah, the big increase at the bottom, folks, from 309 last year to 350, $30,000 and change would go to support half of the full-time position that I would share with Public Works. It would be huge. It would be a huge help because they would be with my department from April until September, and then they would be with Mark's group October through March. I understand the economy and I understand everyone else's needs, but I think it's important for us to have you guys consider that. Yeah.
Well, a couple of things. One, what would it mean if we delayed that for a year? Second, have we resigned ourselves to the fact that the pool is not going to open this summer?
Well, you know what, like Tammy, I've heard about the governor's report or recommendations, but I haven't seen it. I did hear there was something about parks, fields, and playgrounds.
Even through the whole summer, they're not going to allow gatherings of more than 50 people.
Yeah, right.
So there's no point in opening up the pool if we can't be at capacity because we already lose money on it as it is. And I'd rather just resign ourselves to the fact that we can't open it and try to save money there.
I can't imagine that we would open the pool either, to be honest with you.
And so have we had that discussion? How does that affect the money that we pay to the Alphon Youth Center? Would we not owe them that money?
Well,
have we had that discussion?
We wouldn't owe them, correct. So with my budget, maybe not like everyone else's, the pool costs between $80,000 and $100,000 to run, and we typically bring in on the revenue side $85,000 to $90,000. So if we're not opening and running the pool, we're not spending $100,000. Of course, we're not bringing the revenue in either, so it's not a huge loss as far as the bottom line goes.
I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $30,000 is the difference between expenses and revenue.
Yeah, I like to think, Eric, over the last few years, we've done better than that, because what the budget doesn't indicate or specify is that we typically bring in between $7,000 and $9,000 in concessions. Those concessions are pool concessions. So maybe your 25 becomes 17, 18. It's a hard place to make money, I'll be honest. We do the absolute best we can, but the structure that we had, the philosophy behind the resource that it is, we're not charging people.
But it would also free up your employees to do stuff besides opening up the pool, right?
Yeah. If we were to ask them if we should open the pool, they would decide pretty quickly that we wouldn't open. It would. It's a ton of maintenance for the whole month of May into the second part of June and until the middle part of June. So yes, it would.
And back to my first question about what happens if we delay this new position for a year.
We'll
What kind of-
keep getting by, but we could really use them. I mean, we could use them sooner than later, but yeah, we'll survive.
No, man, I think what Eric's asking is that if we don't open the pool, does that give you more flexibility with the seasonals that you hire? I'm assuming in the 10 to 12 seasonals, are those also lifeguards that you hire?
No,
No,
That's-
okay.
right.
So it doesn't add anything different. By not opening the pool, you're not gaining extra bodies that you can then simply allocate.
Well,
do
for the
other
next 6
things.
or 8 weeks, yes, I would be gaining.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
At what point do we have to make that decision? About whether-
About committing,
I mean, can I just, I mean, I think it's great to have these discussions, but I do just want to put out there, like, the reality that we're going to have a budget. Like, can we just be honest about that at this point? Like, I think we have plenty of time to hash this out because we're not going to have a budget by July 1.
Well, right, but the question is, at what point do they have to make the decision so they can get the
Oh.
work done? If we were
Yeah.
to try to open the pool, which I think is not gonna happen, but
Yeah, I'd say the second week of May, Counselor Thomas, we'd have to decide because it takes about a month to get that place going. So yeah, within the next couple weeks.
Rick, you're on mute, just FYI.
Thanks. So reading up on the state's already either implemented or is going to implement freeze hiring. I'm not talking, I'm just throwing it out there that those words are being handed out. So they're already getting ready for shortfalls on their side, which is going to equal shortfalls on our side. So we should be looking at hiring freezes. Sorry, Matt, but I got to bring forth that information so that we can all be informed. So,
Right. Yeah, I understand.
And as far as that goes, Matt, I love the parks. I'm an outdoors kind of guy, but we are going to face the reality of less money to spend. So, are there other places in your budget that you may be able to cut back?
It would be personnel, like a lot of our departmental budgets. It would be only doing maintenance wise what needed to be done, I guess, and it wouldn't be taking on new projects. Bringing back a few less people would be a cost savings. Other than that, there's I know you guys have heard it, but we're really thin too, and we're proud to be thin. So,
oh, and don't forget, we've got to take care of the cemeteries. Up until a couple years ago, Parks and Rec were about parks and recreation, but then Matt's seasonal workers ended up working in the cemeteries, and it's been a good thing. Certainly a big cost savings, I think, overall, but it's meant a big part of their workload.
we just close all the parks. I didn't say that.
Well, Matt, the big question. I mean, the playground. I mean, people show up at the playground, like they can still go there, right? It's not like chained off, is it?
there's a sign up that says that it's closed, but
We're not monitoring that.
All right. So we're not going to have like a million hit YouTube video of Waterville PD arresting some mom, right, Chief? I saw one of those.
We haven't violated anybody's rights yet, Mayor. Not one person. Not one.
I didn't think so, but
Well,
We've gone,
for instance, Matt, if you closed the gate at the road where the pavement stops, would that mean that you wouldn't have to do as much maintenance gravel road back through the park?
No, with that case in particular, we have the road graded each year. We don't add a whole lot of material, so of course we wouldn't be adding a lot of material. But it doesn't cost us anything to have the road graded, so that wouldn't be a cost savings.
how about Quarry Road?
I thought that's what he said.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking
Okay.
about, Quarry Road.
Oh, okay, yep. We're getting to that budget page, but Sid, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make the comments to Matt, like I do every year, that he does. He's another one that does a lot, really a lot around the city with almost nothing. Just, from Purnell Field to, to the pool, to the cemetery, to the Riverwalk, to all the other small parks, the assistance at Quarry Road. It's just phenomenal what this department does. I can't say enough about the frugal parts of what he does. The cemetery has been a huge undertaking for him that we bestowed upon him after we found out the failures of a private contractor. I mean, we can go back there, Mike Roy, and think about the nightmare, horrible things that happened in the cemetery with that private contractor. And we've never turned our back since, and it's been such a big improvement. The tree maintenance, Matt, on that, is that part, I'm taking that into line, is that there's a lot of aging trees in that cemetery that probably need work?
Yeah, that's one of them. The cemetery is one of them.
Yeah,
Councilman.
I could tell by going through that over the past couple of years that those trees look pretty gnarly in there, some of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're facing a reality like all the council's saying. I think the pool is probably a no-brainer. It's probably going to be shut up, and it's probably going to be shut down, unfortunately. I feel bad for obviously the youth in the community and in the region because again, we're all going stir crazy through this pandemic, and I feel bad for the parents that have the children in the home, 24/7. And again, it's starting to really put wear and tear. But it's definitely, if that's the reality, if it saves $100,000 on expenses through there, then obviously that's probably the first place we want to look at as making that a reality. And the reality is like everybody's saying on the council and what we're hearing from the state level, and I do hear your request about sharing a part-time, a full-time person with Public Works. I think it's noble. I think it's a good idea. But again, we are facing some realities here, as you know.
Right.
But I just wanted to commend you, Matt, for, again, you really do a lot with very few.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Well, we've covered the pool page, and that's the next page in the budget. I think we've covered it.
Well, it's
After that
yeah, it's
comes the
essentially
Quarry Road page. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, if there weren't questions on the pool page, we didn't go through it line by line, but it's essentially the same with just about a $1,000 increase. So based on wages, minimum wage going up. So yeah, Quarry Road, I guess, would be next, Mike.
Yep.
So just so folks understand, when we put the 1920 budget together, we didn't include a few big things. One of them is a full-time program director that we were able to hire through some fundraising efforts by the Friends of Quarry Road. Very proud they did a great job and succeeded in raising enough money through 3 different groups to fund that for 3 years. And we also took on a large ski program that was formerly run by the Central Maine Ski Club. So the associated revenues that go along with that program are of benefit to the city without question. It's a really nice money-making program revenue source for us. So that's why you'll see the 1920 budget at $50,000 expenditures, and then for this year, it's over, well, it's 108,000. That's a lot. I also wanted to, I don't know, I'm assuming that you guys have questions about Quarry Road, but I'd like to look at the Quarry Road budget along with the revenue page. So I'm not sure what page the Parks and Recreation revenues are on for you.
I think they're page 3, page 4, the Quarry Road revenues.
So if you look down toward the bottom, at least it's toward the bottom of mine, you'll see Quarry Road in the actuals figure for 1920. Do you see 31,224? Quarry Road actuals.
I show that from the July to December.
Yeah.
31,24.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we're at 102,000 right now. So we're doing very well on the revenue side. We've sold in season passes $40,000, in rentals $10,000, in events, in rentals of the facility we're up over 40,000. So we're very proud that we're over $100,000 in revenue right now, not including the reimbursement for the program director. So you'll just have to figure that in when you're looking at the increased revenues. We're going to be in the black at Quarry Road, probably in the $15,000 to $20,000 range at the end of the fiscal year.
Matt, how much of your revenue, I'm sorry, I know you just said it, how much is big events, like things that may not be able to happen?
Yeah. So facility rentals and events account for 44. Yeah, 44,000. But that's next winter, right?
Right, that's next winter.
So that's where all the revenue is gained from Quarry Road.
I'm just gonna be frank, listen, I'm in the concert business and I'm rescheduling things I rescheduled already. Because I honestly, the big gatherings of hundreds of people, it might not be till the middle of next winter that they start letting that stuff happen.
Possible, but
I mean, I think we have to start planning for the worst and hoping for the best.
Especially if the predictions come true that we get another wave in fall, early winter. God, I hope not, but.
I just wouldn't count on those revenues from big events being there.
So, for instance, Matt, you've got a line in here for heating fuel. I presume that's to keep your ski hut warm in the wintertime?
yeah, along with a maintenance building. Yes, sir.
Building. So if there was a reduction in events and fewer people skiing, you might be able to get by with a little less on a line like that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I think that's what we're asking as council, to look around and see where we might be able to have some savings that in anticipation of things not being as good as we're expecting them to be.
Right.
Is that all propane, Matt?
It's primarily propane. Yes.
Primarily propane.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could check the current prices versus what you used when you made out this budget. When we get to the police budget next, you'll find that we have a $12,700 savings in gas alone by the fact that we contracted through Maine Power Options at $1.37 a gallon. When Joe figured his budget, you had estimated what, Joe, for fuel?
Initially 40,000.
No, price per gallon, $2.50.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, 250, yes. Which
Yeah.
And
is,
so we've contracted at $1.37 a gallon, so there's a huge savings there. And you may have it too in propane, Matt.
Mhm.
Sid?
Yeah, Matt, the $9,100 in ski program expenses, is that mostly the snow gun, snow bacon?
No, that's in the ski program, the youth program.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the coaches. We hire coaches, and it's for insurance and for their equipment and gear. And the ski program made about 12,000. So, yeah.
Well, I do want to say, again, the Quarry Road is one of the best kept secrets in the state of Maine. I mean, it's just again, it's one of those assets in the community that is not only just a community, but it's a region attraction. They come in from everywhere, and I got to say, friends of the Quarry Road, and it's certainly worth the investment and the assistance from the Parks and Rec that has assisted that Quarry Road facility as a shared entity, and it's been awesome over the years. the economic boom that has brought to this city in local economic dollars has been unbelievable. I know that from the hospitality business. I know it from the hotel business. And I certainly know it from talking to local business people downtown, that people come and they really visit Waterville in a big way. So I do want to make known that as a huge asset, and it kills me as a business person, along with many other business people, with this pandemic, obviously, and this horrible things that are happening. It kills me to think that that's going to be drastically reduced this year. But I do.
Well, we could be getting more
Eric,
people
like
there.
Eric said, we got to prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, right now, to be honest, the Quarry Road's probably getting more people. I know Amanda was there, and you know, Matt, she goes there all the time. She was there today. But over the weekend, it was nice out, and she said there was new people come. People were asking where the quarry was because they had never been there before. The reality is, right now, there may be a bigger demand for the Quarry Road now more than ever because people aren't going to sit in their houses and watch TV nonstop all summer. They want to get out.
Yeah, happy to have those places all open, all our trails and the Riverwalk included.
Yes, you're right, Mayor. The Quarry Road is one of those places where you can go and be socially distant from everybody.
Look at other people, and people are generally happy and they smile and wave. And
Okay, so Mike, I think the last pages are Parks and Recreation programs.
Yep. Not much new there.
No, not much new, but I'll be honest. There may be, I was looking at things a little closer this week, and I may be able to trim this budget down a bit, upwards of like $6,000 or $7,000 on my own, because I think that some accounts may have gotten combined that I wasn't quite able to get with Aaron on before this meeting. So
Okay. Well, Aaron,
the 61,000 that you see under the manager request for 2021.
Right.
I should be able to be real close to the 1920 budget of 54, maybe 55. So yeah, other than that, there's not a lot we can change unless there are questions.
Okay, Aaron is keeping track of all the changes, Matt. So if you have reductions, either in the heating fuel or other things, give him a list of those reductions, because he's keeping a master list that we'll get to when we try to put everything together at the end.
Okay.
Everybody okay? Parks and Rec?
Okay, thanks everyone. I'm very proud to work here for the city, and I appreciate what all you guys are doing. This is, in a word, unprecedented. So we'll get through it, right? You guys all know that. Be optimistic. Eric's probably right in planning for bad and hoping for good, but I'm still just hoping for good sooner than later. Yeah. So thank you. If you're good, I'm good.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Good luck, Chief.
Thanks.
Okay, police is next. Police department is by far our largest department, personnel-wise and dollar-wise. It's the biggest dollar-wise because of the personnel that we have, the number of personnel, which, Joe, you told me is 41, 42 total?
41.
41, okay. Why don't you take us through then that operation page? And in the police budget, folks, there are 3 different accounts. One is the one we're looking at right now. The second one is the dispatch, the comm center. And the third account, very small, is animal control.
Let me say the budget I want to present tonight is an increase of 182,000 over my current budget, or about 4.4%. Of that $182,000 increase, about $61,000 is for the new dispatch position that we've talked about as a result of increase in dispatching revenues. So that only leaves about $100,000, and out of that, as we go through the budget, you'll see that a good portion of that is taken up in wages and benefits. So operationally, out of that $182,000 is a very small percentage of what goes to operations. And the total operations for the police department, where I have some discretion of the money, is only about $325,000 out of a $4.2 million budget. The rest is all wages and benefits. It's nothing that I can have any discretion with. It's contractual. So even though it sounds like a large budget, over $4 million, there's very little discretionary money that I have there out of my operational budget. I guess we can start quickly. I'll go down the revenues on that first page. We have witness fees, traffic and parking fines, which we anticipated would hit about $15,000 this year. But given what's going on right now, we suspended the parking enforcement officer from doing parking enforcement. A couple of reasons: we don't want to expose him unnecessarily. And number two, given what's going on, businesses and the public and employees, they just don't need a ticket at this time. So, we probably won't reach that milestone of 15,000. Special details, 20,000. Professional revenue services, that is the $10,000 that we'll receive from Colby to offset the parking enforcement officer's salary. The reimbursement for the school officer, we're hoping that, I don't know what went on at the school budget last night, but indication that they were going to come back and fund 75% of the school resource officer, which would be about $62,500. So we're waiting to hear, I think, the final word on that.
Right, but that's not in your budget at the moment.
No, it's not, no. The MDEA agent reimbursement, for some of you that may not be familiar with that, we assign an officer to the state drug enforcement agency, and they reimburse for full wages and benefits while they're gone. Accident reports are about the same. Miscellaneous revenue, animal control, and then of course the last one is our comm center fees. And those you can see has increased significantly. We went from 161,000 to now will be a little over 300,000 that will generate in comm center revenue as a result of the rate increase.
A long overdue rate increase.
The next page, if you look at the top, that starts with the full-time wages. We're down $27,000. That's a result of losing 3 officers who are at step number 5 and bringing in new officers at entry level. And there's a significant difference in the wages there. It's about $6 an hour. In addition, the animal control officer wages were put in that wage line. And so it'll be offset once Kobe obviously gives us that money for that particular position.
Eric, you have a question?
I do eventually when the chief is.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Go ahead.
I guess it's the same question I had for Matt, really, which is this new position. What would it mean if we weren't able to fund that for this year? Could we possibly, if we did want to put it in this year, could we maybe wait to hire it halfway through the year to knock out half of that cost? Like, what effect will that have on the comm center if we don't hire another person?
Couple of beers.
I think it'll have a significant impact. The fact that we dispatch for so many communities, they have an expectation that we'll maintain a level of dispatching services that they expect. And right now, we have some times where we only have one dispatcher on. We have several other communities we're dispatching for, along with Waterville, and having one dispatcher on just is you know, it's not safe. That's the bottom line. It's not
I don't
safe.
disagree with that, but I guess here's what I'm getting at. We settled on new fees for the other towns based on our current staffing. And perhaps we should have set those fees higher if we intend to hire another person. But as I recall, we agreed that we would set those fees and then we wouldn't increase them for, was it 3 years, Mike?
Believe so, yes.
And then we would negotiate a contract where there were built-in increases every year. But I mean, we're eating up a third of our new revenue with a new person that we didn't factor in when we set the fees for this year. So, I mean, I don't doubt that we need them. But again, in a year where, at the end of this, it's going to be hard to make the case to people that we're going to raise taxes. When we're in the middle of what we're in. So.
I think part of the argument, a good part of the argument of raising the dispatching fees was to hire that additional dispatcher.
Right, but we
I
didn't
think
have that discussion.
I mean, I think that's the expectation from our customers. I think it's going to have a huge impact on the dispatchers themselves, morale-wise. We try to fill those vacant slots we have with just one person with overtime. That's challenging. And just so you're clear, the dispatching fee isn't coming out of this full-time wages here that we're looking at admin. It's coming out on the very last page of the comm center. And that money is in their wages and benefits.
I mean, I guess I just wonder if perhaps we should revisit this idea that we aren't going to raise rates for 3 years, and we should have a conversation with the other towns again and be like, look, we might have to raise these rates next year. Like, we made a commitment for this budget year and they've already made plans, but we might have to talk about next year recouping some of that money.
I find it hard to pick on this one because, in essence, we're raising fee. The chief is making a lot more money, and Eric, you had a lot to do with that. But this allows us to essentially bring in new customers. Am I wrong? Or at least,
yeah.
I'm all for that. Listen, I think there's an opportunity at the comm center for us to bring in other communities and make more revenues. But I want to see what the plan is to do that. What are we doing to actively recruit more communities to use our comm center to offset the costs?
but I think right now, Chief's just trying not to burn out the people he's got.
Right. For me to take on him any more customers with the existing staffing, I wouldn't recommend that. So
even with the additional person?
Yes, if we have that additional person, then I think it would be safe and prudent to go ahead and try to get some of these other communities. But with the existing staffing, I wouldn't go out there and recommend that we take on another community. We just don't have the staffing for it. I would not feel comfortable doing that.
Rick?
Eric, you got to remember that, and don't take me wrong for what I'm going to say, but the communities that we do serve right now are under the same strain we're going to be under, numbers wise. If we go looking at jacking rates up again, they're going to shop someplace else. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose the revenue stream. And I get what you're saying, Eric. I'm not looking for a back and forth. It's just one of those things that we're all looking at our budgets going, what's coming down the road. That's all I wanted to say about that.
I understand that. I mean, I will say, this is the same discussion we had when we talked about raising rates before. They really don't have many other options, let's be frank. And again, our job is to look out for Waterville's budget.
I get it. I get it. I wasn't arguing against it. I wasn't arguing for it. Just
I agree, but I think we are looking out for Waterville's budget if by not taking our frontline people who are the most stressed and burning them out, which we've pushed hard for five years I've been involved, and I've been part of that, trying to push and stretch and push and stretch. Here's an opportunity that's created. I do think when we need to take into consideration whether something's the right thing to do, and not just be like, well, screw everybody else because they don't have anywhere else to go. I think I think we need to be fair to Waterville taxpayers and to our partners, because if I was doing business with somebody who was not fair to me and had that attitude towards me, I would probably pay more to go somewhere else. And I'm not saying that's your intent, Eric, at all. I'm not judging that at all. I just think we need to be careful with our language when we talk about that. And I think we're drilling down on a line here. And again, this whole budget's been blown up. I mean, we're not going to have a budget for a long time, so we have plenty of time to discuss it. But we've looked at quite a few other increases in here that we haven't drilled on nearly as hard as this one. This one has like 3 times the income to pay for it.
I just want, we have to have the discussion. And it always helps me to hear the justification. And I think it helps for taxpayers to hear it too. Why is this police budget up that much in a year when we're going to be down on revenues? And if there's a good justification for it, I want the chief to put it out there in the public. And I agree that we need the person in the comm center. I guess my only argument would be that we should make it a priority to add more communities to bring in more revenue.
Yeah. Sid?
Yeah, I agree on all those fronts. And like I said, we're all cognizant of the fact of what this budget's going to have to be with the situation that we're being imposed upon by. I do agree with Chief about public safety and our first responders. We have to, they're the frontline people on this pandemic and through every other bad situation that happens to community, region, state, and national. So it's if the morale problem and if we've raised the fees already and it's going to help pay for another dispatcher in the form of a public safety person, and it's going to attract more business if we can obviously keep the towns that we have and add on a couple more. I think the investment will pay dividends, and that's the dividends that we want to see. And I agree with Eric and the rest of the council about attracting more towns, and I think the chief is very much open to that. We do want to get more people on board, and we do want to create revenue lines, and sometimes an investment, even a small one, will reap dividends in that aspect, and that's ultimately where we want to be.
Bob?
I think I think what Eric is flagging, I think for, excuse me, for all of the departments, not just the police department, the Parks and Recreation, that we're looking at serious revenue shortfalls in our budget, and everybody should be aware that that the wishful thinking budgets may not be there. So this is the time for all the departments to start thinking about ways that they can help us, help the city continue to provide the service that it needs at the cost that it can afford.
I would second that.
I agree.
Are we able to maybe start this person off as maybe like part-time to relieve some of the pressure of the current dispatchers? And then when we bring on, with the understanding that once we bring on new additional revenue, that we bump them up to the full-time status?
Well, part-time dispatcher, they need a lot of training, and they need continuous training, and they get most of that by working. And I just don't see that as a workable solution, a part-time dispatcher. We have tried recruiting part-time dispatchers who work for other dispatching centers because they're fully trained. They stay up on all the current stuff, and we just have not been able to do that. So to go out and try to recruit someone who has no dispatching experience, tried to get them trained up to the level that they need to be trained and maintained, again, I think would be difficult. I just don't see that as a workable solution that would help us here. All right, I'll move on if someone has any other questions. I think the only other thing in wages, as you can see, we increased our overtime 13,677. That just reflects the increases in wages, raises, and those types of things. And if you drop down to our benefit line, the next category down here, you'll see that Maine State retirement went up $27,343, very significantly. Some other increases there for Medicaid. Almost all of them are increases except for one or two. Group health insurance went up $8,000. And then if you get down to stipends, that cost of $58,262 in the stipends reflects educational stipends, longevity stipends, communication sergeants and detective sergeants get stipends. So that represents that group of stipends. The next category is my operating budget. Very little has happened there. If you get down through there, you can see that we went up $9,000 in training and conferences. That's because we have 3 officers that are going to be scheduled to go to the Maine Criminal Justice Academy, and we have to pay them $3,000 per officer. We went up on $1,000 on lab fees. You'll see the next several, we did not go up. We maintained the same amount. We went up $1,000 on vehicle equipment. And so you'll see some small increases there.
Chief, why is the stipends line looks like a new line? Where did that, was it somewhere else in the budget before?
Yes, it was in wages.
Okay,
And it had to be taken out of there. Bobby Joe had to deal with the Fair Labor Standard Act, and it had to be separated out there so you could see it. As Mike said, we were able to lock in the gas price of $1.37, so that was a huge saving for us, much more than reflected there. The gas price is now, I think, going to be $27,400, so quite a savings there. The next page, we went up on wearing apparel, $7,000. We anticipate that we're going to hire 3 more people, and outfitting them for uniforms and all the equipment that they need runs about $2,000 to $3,000 per person. So we want to make sure that we could cover that.
Not 3 more, but 3 new people.
3 new people, right? We have 2 vacancies. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then the only other increase there, it was not an increase, actually a decrease, is vehicles, which we anticipate that will replace 1 detective vehicle. And by the way, out of this current budget, we had appropriated $82,000 to buy 2 vehicles. And as I think the council knows, we purchased those out of our forfeiture fund. When we talk about trying to save money and offset our budgets and reduce the tax burden, I think over the last several years, the forfeiture fund has paid for 4 brand new police vehicles, and we offset 1 city budget by $130,000 that came out of our forfeiture money. So again, that, we don't mind doing that. We want to do our part to reduce taxes and, minimize the burden. But again, the 2 cruisers that were slated to come out of this current budget was paid for out of forfeiture fund. The next page is our facility maintenance. There's not much there. If you look down through, there was a $2,000 increase in the facility maintenance account. Cleaning supplies stayed the same, utilities, heating, fuel, and that rounded out the police department administrative portion of the budget. The next section.
Updated all the line items for fuel oil, right? I don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that, Counselor. We did what?
I said the expense line for heating fuel for all of our facilities hasn't been updated to reflect the lower price that we got.
No. Joe, I guess that's another account, Joe, that we got to take a look at. We adjusted the vehicle fuels, but I don't think, no, we didn't look at that heating oil account today, so we should do that tomorrow.
But we're on natural gas.
Oh, you're on that, that's right. That's why we didn't do it. That's right.
The only impact the lower fuel is gonna have on us is for gasoline.
Mike,
Yeah, but the natural gas pricing may be less than when we budgeted
That
back
could.
in February.
Not true, Mike. Natural gas has gone up.
Really?
Yes, it's natural gas is an artifact of oil exploration, not oil production. So if exploration slows down, there's less natural gas.
Therefore, price will go up.
Price goes up.
Mike, do we have the overall number for our budget, what we saved? Can you resend the summary page with some of the bigger items factored into it so we can get an idea of what we're looking at this point?
The plus and minus things that we've already seen for corrections. and
Right.
changes.
And things
Yep,
like fuel oil and gas and all that.
yep, we can do that. Yep. I will do that. Okay,
The next page reflects our animal control budget, and nothing changed in there. 24,769 current budget. That's what we proposed for the next budget. So there was zero change there. Unless anyone has any questions, I'll just move on from that one. And the very last one is our communication center. In the full-time salaries and wages, that dispatcher position is in there. So as you can see, there's a $57,000 increase in that. Overtime went up $5,000. And then again, if you drop down the fringe benefits, you'll see that there was a significant increase in our group health insurance, $41,475. That was a huge jump. And then the operational part of it.
Why was that so big?
Bobby gives us those numbers, and when I ask that question, usually it's because we have new people coming on who take a family plan opposed to the single, or someone takes the more expensive plan. I think there's two plans that we can choose from that the city offers, and one is much more expensive from the other. It just
When we
takes.
budget for a new person, we usually budget for the worst. Like Joe said, full family coverage may not happen, depends on who we hire.
Right, we haven't actually hired those people yet, right?
Right, because you're budgeting for 3 new people, right? Meaning new persons coming into
Oh,
positions that are already
to
there.
replace existing,
Right.
yeah.
Replace existing.
So you
Yeah.
basically 3 of your highest numbers cooked into that line.
Right, but they could come in and it could be a single person who will take
Right.
the much lower.
That makes a little more sense when you look at it. I was like, what was it, one person? You got one person in there, but I realized there's 3 people that we haven't hired that we have to potentially count.
Well, right, but this is just for the communication center, isn't it?
This is just for the communication.
Yeah, just for the comm center.
Right.
So we're really talking about the one new person,
In this case, yes.
which would make sense if 2 people were costing us X amount of
Doesn't line
dollars.
up with the other.
one new person is going to increase that line by 50%.
We just hired 2 new people in the last several months. So they came in at the higher price, the higher insurance premium because of the plan that they took. So that's reflecting in this new budget, along with what the worst case scenario would be if we hired the additional dispatcher that we're talking about. Then again, operationally wise, it almost stayed flat except for one increase there in our equipment that we plan to buy radios with. And that's my budget. Any questions? I do have one other budget item for the council. And in earlier discussions back in January or February, before COVID hit, and we find ourselves that we're in the situation we're in, there was support from the council for an additional officer. And I know that these are tough times, but when there's tough times, the workload for us gets much greater. And we are often find ourselves in a position where we have only 3 officers on, and sometimes 2, depending on vacations and training and sick time. And again, I go back to the pressures and the challenges of policing a service center, which is a much bigger population than we're staffed to police. In addition to that, we're starting to do so many other alternatives other than enforcement that ties the officer up for long periods of time as we try to find alternatives to an arrest, whether it's someone who has mental illness or someone who has addiction, whether we're dealing with the colleges or whether we're dealing with the hospitals, the homeless that we had issues with last summer. We spent a significant amount of time trying to get them out of the Hedda Falls area. We do the golf tournaments, we do concerts to support the HOPE program so that we can help some of these folks that are addicted and divert from an arrest to treatment. And all of that requires an officer to spend sometimes 2, 3, 4 hours that takes that officer off the road. Now, instead of having 3 officers to respond to calls, we only have 2. We can be tied up at the hospital from 10 minutes to 6 or 8 hours, depending on the situation. Domestic violence, because of the mandates that are put on us to stay with the victim, to go back and notify the victim when the defendant is released from the jail, to do all the assessments that we need to do, to bring the defendant back to the home to get his personal stuff. That can tie up an officer for hours. So again, it's just not, are we seeing a huge increase in calls for service or crimes, but it's, again, engaging in that activity that keeps officers tied up for great lengths of time and just leaves, 1 or 2 officers to respond to call for services. So, that comes with, again, when we have these downturns and we find ourselves in these types of situations, then the workload for us gets greater. I know that that's a pretty stiff cost. It's almost $88,000 for an officer with wages and benefits. But again, that was a discussion we had, and patrol faces the same thing as dispatchers, burnout from constant overtime. Ordering people in is just it's challenging, to say the least. So if the council would consider that, I know there's really no good time to do that, but we certainly could use that additional officer.
I know I just said the hiring freeze, but can you give us numbers in writing?
For the cost of the officer?
Yep.
The total cost is $87,885. That's for wages and benefits for additional officer.
Like any way we can throw this in, I'm not, don't mean it that way, but any way we can get this in writing in our, so we can stick it in our books.
Sure, absolutely.
Well, let's leave that as a separate item until we actually decide we want to add it. So Mike will work up like a list of things that may or may not be added or subtracted from the budget. So I think we should put that on that list, and not necessarily put it into this budget yet until we all decide we want it to go in. And to the chief's point, I mean, unfortunately, we're in sort of a catch-22, both with the police department and the fire department, which is that this situation that we're in is putting them under more stress and more demand, but it's also sapping our revenues and our ability to add, to support those departments the way they need to be, with revenues. So, I mean, I was the one who brought up the additional officer 2 months ago. And obviously lots of things have changed since then. I think I'm still open to having that conversation, but it's going to tie into the larger context of what's going on with the rest of the budget. Is there going to be any, like, for example, is there going to be any federal relief for state and local governments? The federal government hasn't really addressed that yet. I think we need to wait to see how some of those things play out before we start making these kind of decisions.
So my only two thoughts, and this is kind of overarching, not just for police. Yeah, I agree with Eric. We're going to be hard pressed to look taxpayers in the eye this year when they're all at work and tell them we're raising their taxes. My second thought is that these are great exercises. I think more like along what the line of what Claude was saying, where we're kind of touching base with departments and letting them know what's coming. Reality is we have no clue when we're going to have a budget. It probably will not. It's like a great exercise to kind of give that warning shot. But at the same time, we're not actually crafting a budget necessarily right now. This is going to be like a stream of consciousness budget for the next several months.
Well, and I wonder if it makes sense. I mean, I don't know if we're done with him, but anyway, when we are done with him, to have sort of just a bigger philosophical discussion so people can voice kind of overarching goals for this budget and what they want to see Mike working towards as we get into actual numbers. Like, where are we trying to get at the end of this? Presumably we're trying to get to either 0 tax increase or the smallest possible tax increase. I don't think there's any chance taxes are going down. Unfortunately, the only way of achieving either of those things is dipping pretty heavily into our surplus. And we have limited ability on that front, what we can do. I mean, we do have a policy of 12%. That's our policy. It's not something we're tied to. It's certainly a discussion we can have. Maybe in the short term, it makes sense to dip below that. I don't know, and then hope that things get better moving forward. But
I think, it's hard. I was going to bring up the fact that we want a bond in a year, but who the heck knows?
Well, yeah, that's one of the big question marks all over the place. And clearly, if we're going to need more police officers, more firefighters, those are the arguments for doing that, Chief, are a matter of spelling out to the community exactly what the needs are, and what your plans are to fulfill those needs. I think you make an excellent case to us. The question is, can you persuade the people of Waterville that they need an extra police officer, extra firefighter? this is the time to do it, of course. You guys are doing great work and really keeping things. I think one of the great things about Waterville is we've been able to keep things pretty well under control so far. And so the ultimate question, though, is where are we going to find the money?
And I think we all need to kind of take a look around our city over the next month. You know, it's almost more difficult because we all know what our own situation is because we're all sheltered where we are essentially. But Mike, is there a way we can, you know, I mean, and maybe there's not. I realize the difficulty of what I'm asking, but like, do we know like how many people in the city have lost their jobs? Do we know how many? You know, do we know what the local banks are doing to help folks? It seems like everybody has been told you don't have a job, you have no money, except for the banks. And the banks, coincidentally, are actually the ones who are going to be just fine. So, like, nobody's talked about like suspending mortgage payments and things like that. And these are just things that we're going to have to be really, really sensitive to. And I think there's just going to be a lot of fallout that we're kind of on the cusp right now. We're almost still in the dream world where it's like, well, maybe this would end, but I think after today, it's like we might be just steered in that to go off that cliff pretty soon. I'm worried about that, and I'm worried about the people that we might not hear from that are just in their homes with whatever life situations they are. Chief, those are the people that you probably deal with a lot. Actually, it's a lot of those people. Talking about rise in domestic violence and things like that.
It's definitely a challenging time, but I can say, you know, that I think we got a great team in the city of Waterville. All the department heads, city manager. I appreciate all the support from the council and the mayor. And I think during these last several weeks, I think it's really shown what we can do when we pull together. You know, we know there's a lot of people out there and they're in tough situations, and we're going to do everything we can to help and lessen the impact of this virus on our community. But again, I'm just proud to be working for the city, and I think you know, we do a tremendous job in providing the services that are required.
Well, I remember it might have been close to a year ago. I came to a department head meeting, and I looked around the table at all you, and when I saw you all in one room, I said, it's pretty amazing to see who we actually have here running the city. And that still holds. We are very fortunate, and I certainly wouldn't want to be a public servant anywhere else during this time, because you guys are really the ones who are doing it all, not us. We're the wonky brain. We're the wonks behind the scenes trying to figure out how to piece the puzzle together. But you guys are the ones that are actually doing all the work. So we appreciate it.
Well, and to the mayor's point, this situation has really highlighted how great our city employees are. And I think we're going into a tough budget, and generally speaking, when you talk about trying to cut money out of the budget, you're talking about personnel. And so we have to keep in mind how our decisions affect the city personnel, and keep in mind the fact that we have really great employees. We do. I mean, we are pretty lucky with most of the people who work for the city. And I know, there's always, when you talk about the government, that's what you're talking about. It's not a nameless, faceless creature. It's all of those people. And so I just hope that the public and the counselors will keep that in mind when we get into what is going to be a very difficult discussion when we get into the reality of what this year's budget looks like.
Well, I agree with Eric. It would be good to have a session where we can have this kind of a discussion. We've got just a couple more departments to do. Public Works being a very big one, then capital improvements. And good news last night from the school side, their request to us is 30,000 less from taxes than last year. So that
Does that still
certainly is
include
good.
the driver's ed teacher?
I'm sorry?
Does that still include the driver's ed instructor?
I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
Does that still include the driver's ed instructor?
As far as I know, yes. As far as I know, but I wasn't listening in last night. I did hear from Eric, and said he would like to meet with the finance committee. So the council finance committee people are the mayor, council chair, Sydney, you're still on that finance committee, correct? And so we should meet with Eric and his 2 board members in the next week or so and find out from them just what is in their budget. But if we could on May 12th, wrap up all of the department reports with Public Works and probably the bond items on May 12th, that Tuesday. And then we'll have, at least all the departments done, all the corrections made. We can collect, as Eric suggested, a list of those things that are maybes. How much for an additional policeman? What about whatever else may be ifs for next year? And then it'll take a few meetings for us to finally sort all of those things out. Hopefully by then the state revenue picture becomes clear, because really the elephant in the room for our budget is state revenue sharing. And we started out in February saying to you, we expect 2.6 million. And then 3 weeks ago, we had to say, oh, wait, let's go 1.8 million. So we lost 800,000 there. And I'm hoping we don't have to retreat from 1.8 million state revenue sharing to a lower number, but that threat is certainly there. And I think in another, well, I hope in another 3 weeks, we'll know just a lot more, hopefully a lot more about that.
Right. I think unless the federal government steps in to provide relief to state budgets, we're going to see an even bigger hit on revenue sharing.
Right.
Yeah, we just had these like maniac decisions today. Like we just canceled tourist season.
Prior to today, I had read that we were going to be $1 billion in lost revenue in the state of Maine as a whole, let alone what we just did to ourselves today. And if we think we're getting revenue sharing, that's probably a no-go.
Yeah. There's a threat. Well, then we got to look at our surplus, as Eric had said too, our fund balance, and maybe we can spend a little bit more of that than we normally would want to. Maybe we go to 11% of our budget with our surplus use. So that's one thing Aaron and I have been working on today, is looking at what our surplus is. What if revenue sharing does this? Do we have enough? So we're going to run those scenarios by you. Let's get through our budget, our department budgets, and then we'll have that done. And then we can look at the big picture, talk about the big picture.
Okay.
We good? Good.
Mhm.
Good. Yes.
Good.
Just quickly before we close out, the solar committee has been meeting for the past week and a half.
Yep. I think we're adjourned.
Just in time.
What happens when you run your Claude's internet runs on solar power? His battery.
Claude, we're not laughing at you. Maybe you can hear us.
Yeah,
What
the
I think
sun's not shining.
He can't hear us.
we'll do, I'll call him as soon as we sign off. If we sign off here in a minute or two.
Hurry up
Claude.
in a second.
Oh, my.
Hi, Claude, please come back.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh,
And there he goes.
Second.
All right.
Right.
All right, he's gone?
Everybody.
Yeah.
Good night.
All right,
All
good.
Bye-bye.
Next Tuesday night, regular council meeting.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Alrighty. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.